$63 million. This was the total amount of winning prize money in the California lottery in 2016. According to the author, Sonali Khalid in the LA Times, this money would be given to California public schools if it went unclaimed. If you did the math, you could buy 12,600,000 Starbucks drinks if you really wanted to. But imagine this money going to public schools, a place where not many Americans think funding is a necessity. But for the past couple of decades, it's been a dire struggle to maintain. But even $63 million doesn't really seem to be enough to properly fund all of these schools. Author Carrie Hanel says that California has been underspending on education, especially given its high cost of living and the needs of its students. School funding has been insufficient for decades, and it's created a chasm between the foundation in education and the future generations of students. In recent years, California has been falling short of adequacy, which is a word used to describe the sufficient funding needed to help every student achieve their basic academic goals. The Statistics Policy Analysis for California Education states that California is 39th in education spending, 40th in education spending as a total percentage of the economy, 48th nationally in teacher-to-student ratios, and 48th in guidance counselor ratios. So, given all these statistics, I'll be uncovering reasons why education funding is so low in California due to the high cost of living here, the high tax rates, the COVID-19 recession, as well as ways that we can help this cause. So, like I said before, California has been spending less than average on K-12 education, and there's been a reoccurring underinvestment from the policy analysis of California education. This has affected every aspect of education, from the students' well-being all the way to the teachers' professional development. So from this graph, you can tell that California is a lot lower than states like New York, New Jersey, and Illinois, and even a little bit under the national average spending in the United States. Author Blake Stephan also says that California's high cost of living has also caused many schools and districts to afford fewer teachers, staff, and services for their students. The Digest of Education Statistics also states that a California teacher salary is around $84,000. This is pretty high, given how much money usually teachers are being paid, but according to the Cost of Living Index in the United States, cost of living here is around 142.4, where the national benchmark is only around 100. So this is relatively high, given the average of many states. So this consistent underinvestment has led to many schools to be extremely short-staffed. And also, according to the National Education Association, to have one of the nation's worst student-to-teacher ratios. This has caused many teachers to be responsible for a lot more kids, meaning they have less individual time with each of their students, as well as less time for their own professional development. According to an article in Wall Street Journal titled "School Brawl in California," a student named Rudy Suarez is a freshman in high school, and she's attending a science class of over 30 students. And she's really seen the effect of her large class size, so she said that it's loud and distracting and hard for her to learn. So if more money was spent on California's public schools, they could shrink class sizes and give a lot more attention to each individual student. So California not only has a high cost of living, but it's also a high tax state. This means that they invest a lot less of their money into schools than other states in the country. So in a rough estimate done by author Eduardo Porter in the New York Times, California spends around 14% of their money into schools, where the national average is at 54%. Well, let's break these numbers down a little bit more. In the U.S. Census Bureau, California puts exactly 3.04% of their total economy into education, where the national average is around 3.7%. California's school revenues also rely heavily on state funds and property taxes, as well as other income taxes. Author Carrie Hanel says that relying on state funds and income taxes is extremely volatile. and it makes state education vulnerable to economic fluctuations. In simple terms, that just means when the economy changes, the funding for schools changes. And an example of this would be the COVID-19 recession that we've been living in for the past almost 2 years. So this inadequate funding has also led to less per pupil expenditure, which is how much money is being spent on each individual student. The NEA, the National Education Association statistics, state that California spends around $13,729 compared to a state like New York, which spends around $26,000 per student. So since there's not enough money going to schools, there's also not enough money going to each individual student, giving them less opportunities, such as clubs or extracurriculars, or even activities they want to participate in school. Another big factor has been the COVID-19 recession. This put a huge strain and financial distress onto many schools and districts in California. Author Dan Walters says that California was not a growing success in schools for the past couple of decades, and even before the pandemic. And by almost every measure, the state has lagged behind. In the policy analysis for California education, the recession started a ripple effect in California. Many schools face declining revenues, declining student achievement, and declining student enrollment. The increased cost of online school has also made it difficult for schools to protect the funds they need to keep the schools running. Author Anna Ponce also says that even before the pandemic, Author Anna Ponce says that the pandemic recession has accelerated disparities that were already there before the pandemic had started. And it's really shined a light onto the problem of insufficient funding in California, really giving them a chance maybe to rebuild. So why should we invest more into education funding? The first is that society benefits economically when there's higher education. The second is that it's critical in maintaining a strong democracy. And third, it's a key lever of equity. It's prone to lead to economic and more social mobility, especially in a time where racial disparities and inequalities are at its highest rate. So how can we turn these intended efforts into more practical solutions for the future? The first is to make better use of available resources. If governments could reevaluate their spending habits and disperse more money towards education, the schools would get a lot more funding. The second is to raise new tax revenues. Because of the volatile nature of the state funds and income taxes that schools heavily rely on, a lot of schools face a lot of financial uncertainty. So if we can broaden the tax base and spread the burden across multiple sectors, we can have more modest tax rates and equalize the differences in different school districts, such as ones that are a little bit more wealthy versus ones that are a little bit more poor. And the last, suggested by author Harry Hanel, is to make more long-term plans that implement a proper allocation of funds and prioritize the needs and goals of each student and staff in their schools. So these are all pretty big steps that we can take that maybe we aren't capable of doing yet, but how can we make some smaller strides toward helping this cause? This is a QR code to a link of a petition on change.org, which is dedicated to more funds for California schools in particular. So currently they're at around 900 signatures and their goal is 1,000. So if you guys want to scan the link, please feel free. So although the insufficient funding and the detrimental impacts of the COVID-19 recession has created a huge chasm in the public school system, California now has a true chance to rebuild and grow from the spot that they were in prior. I'm going to end with a quote by Pedro Noguero, and it says that we cannot undo the past, we can recover in a way